What's going on, guys? Kevin here from thesportsgeek.com, and in this video I'm going to break down a lineup from last Friday's DraftKings NBA contest where I placed third and won $5,000. As you guys can see here, I tweeted out the picture of it, and thanks for the help last night. Fantasy Labs would be lost in NBA DFS without your tools. And then after that tweet, I had a lot of people asking me how I build my NBA lineups, how I use Fantasy Labs, that kind of stuff. I will say that I'm really new to NBA DFS. I don't follow the sport too much. I haven't played much NBA DFS in the past, but now that I have access to Fantasy Labs, I've been playing NBA DFS a little bit this year and had some success. Won the $5,000 placing third, and won about I think it was like $700 on a $27 entry earlier this year with a Fantasy Labs lineup. So I am not a pro at NBA DFS, but Fantasy Labs has helped me build some winning lineups. So let's check out how I created that lineup for that night. So here's the lineup here. As you can see, it placed third out of 171. It was a $300 entry, so I know that's a lot more than most people are playing for. Most people play $3, $20 contests, somewhere around there. I also play those as well, but this night I went in a $300 contest, ended up placing third. I was 1.25 points away from second place and $7,000. So pretty good night. As you can see here, the top three lineups were all above 300, but then after that, it drops down from 318 in third place down to 295 in fourth place. So this night was tough on scoring. Anything over 300 was really good that night. So you can see my lineup here. Let me just talk quickly about what I did that night when I logged in. So I logged into Fantasy Labs NBA player models, and then I went to the fan model like I always do. That's the model I've been using lately. Make sure on DraftKings and then all positions. And here is a list of the top rated players sorted. So when I'm building my NBA lineups, I like to try to kind of expose myself to a bunch of different people's opinions, basically. So I'll read some articles, listen to some podcasts, look at some tweets, anything that I can do to kind of find some players for the night or find out who everyone is on. And this particular night, a lot of people were talking about Anthony Davis, and for good reason. He's a good player, always puts up a big score. He was projected for 53.9 points. That was the highest projection. He was a fourth rated player on Fantasy Labs, but he did cost the second most on the slate, so he was $10,600. So I projected him around 30 to 40% ownership, and I decided that I wanted to fade that. So one of the things I think it's always Jonathan Bales who talks about this, is one way to profit in GPPs is to find what everyone else is doing and then figure out how you can profit if that goes wrong. So if everyone's playing Anthony Davis, how can you profit if that goes wrong, if Anthony Davis doesn't have a big game? So one of the ways is to fade him and play another power forward. So that's kind of what I did for this night. I decided a lot of people would be on him. He's really expensive. He might crush it that night and he might have a really good game and I might not win any money at all. But if he has a bad game, if something happens where he doesn't put up many points, then I can benefit off that and make a profit. So this night I got really lucky, actually. So I faded him in both my lineups. I did two lineups, faded him in both, and he actually ended up getting injured. So unfortunately for everyone who rostered him, he only put up 4.25 points. And let me check here. He was 36.8% owned, as you can see, 4.25 points. So this is an extreme example of how fading a expensive player that's going to be highly owned can work out for you. But I decided I wanted to fade Anthony Davis, and then from there I was looking at the Vegas totals, and the highest total on the board was Golden State at Portland, 215, and I thought that even had a chance of going over the total. So I thought it'd be a really high scoring game, so I wanted to roster at least one player from each team. So I looked in Fantasy Labs, I went under the team column, and I went down trying to find Portland and Golden State players. And luckily, I didn't have to go too far down. As you can see, there's a Portland player right here. So it's Damian Lillard. So I kind of checked into him and decided I wanted to roster him. So I locked him in, and then I wanted to look for a Golden State player that's highly rated. And again, luckily, I didn't have to go too far down with Klay Thompson. Right here at $8,000, projected for 39.1 points. So I kind of looked into him and locked him in. So if I was to look here and find that no Portland players or no Golden State players were highly rated in Fantasy Labs, I probably would have avoided my little gut feeling of going with those two teams or a player from each of those teams, and I would have looked elsewhere. But I went with the highest total, thought it'd be a high scoring game, and luckily there was a player from each team highly rated. I kind of went down and looked a little further down, because I wouldn't be against rostering two or even maybe even 3 players from one of those teams, but no one was highly rated. So if you can get maybe another 2 cheap players or something that are both highly rated in a game that you think is going to be really high scoring, that can pay off for you. But there was no one else really that had good ratings here at Fantasy Lab, so I just stuck with 1 from each team. And then the next thing I did was I went to small forward here. Tony Allen was the highest rated player for there, and he was really cheap, so I knew that if I had Lillard and Thompson that I would have to go cheap somewhere else. So at small forward, we got Tony Allen as a top rated 3,800. Put him into my lineup. He ended up having a really good game, 30 points for his price. It was really good. And then another kind of gut feeling I had for the night was to go with a Cleveland player. So like I said, I had 2 lineups this night. The other lineup was in the qualifier for the fantasy basketball world championship. So in that lineup, I had 2 Cleveland players. I went with James and Irving in that lineup, and I went with Kevin Love in this lineup. I just figured that Cleveland was going to have a big game. They were 10-point favorites. Total wasn't too high, but I thought that there's a good chance that would go over the total. Cleveland would score quite a few points. You can see they put up 125 points, so they probably beat what I expected. Probably expected something like 105 or something like that. They put up 125. You can see Kevin Love had a big game with 40 points. So another thing I want to mention is for the Golden State and Portland game, I thought those players would actually be high owned. So I rostered them knowing or thinking that they would be pretty high owned. I didn't think they would be 10 and 5%. So in the other lineup, I actually faded that game, I think, completely. So that's another thing. Sometimes you can project players to be high owned, but you can still take them. So I took those guys. Then I liked the Cleveland players, so I locked them. I locked 3 Cleveland players into my 2 lineups, and Kevin Love just happened to be in this one. 40.25 points, which was good. He's only 2.9% owned. And then I think the next thing I did was lock in Oladipo. He was, let's see here, he was the highest rated shooting guard on the night, 6,600, 75 rating, projected for 34 points. He ended up having 43 points. So he's a popular play, but I locked him in. And then I had 3 positions to work on. And let's see, forwards, I think, so Dirk was the 5th highest rated forward here in Fantasy Lab. So I already wanted to fade Anthony Davis. I already had Tony Allen in, and I think just from looking at these guys' game logs, I kind of went with Dirk just based on his recent play. Let's take a look. This was the night I rostered him. Yeah, he'd been putting up 34 points the previous 2 games, 18, 35. So yeah, for some reason, just kind of did my research and I went with Nowitzki. And then I locked in Valanciunas, I think was next. So if you go to centers here, yeah, he's the 5th highest rated on Fantasy Labs. And so just given the salary I had left, I think it worked out to be somewhere around 10,000 left. So I knew I had to go a little bit cheaper. Couldn't go with Lopez. I had Lopez in my other lineup because he was the highest rated of the night. So the other lineup I put in that night, I had Lopez. But this one, I went a bit cheaper with Valanciunas. I think I was looking between these 2 guys and ended up going with Valanciunas. And then it worked out perfectly because at guard, we had a couple of guys that were pretty highly rated here under guard that were cheap, and I had somewhere around 4,100, I think maybe 4,300 or something left over. And I had Ginobili in my other lineup, so instead of putting Ginobili in both of my lineups, I thought that was a little risky, given his projection. Wasn't 100% confident in him, so I went down to Sessions, and you can see he's down here, maybe like the 11th rated guard for the night, but he's cheap, 4,100, so I put him in the lineup. So that's basically how I built this lineup. I was just going by a couple gut feels that Portland and Golden State would play a high-scoring game, so I wanted at least 1 player from each side. I thought Cleveland was going to score a lot of points, so I wanted some exposure to Cleveland players in both of my lineups. And then from there, I kind of just built around using the Fantasy Labs fan model, just at the different positions, picking some of the top rated, like Oladipo and Allen were the top rated, and then filling in from there with the leftover salary. So that's pretty much it, guys. There's nothing too scientific to how I build my lineups. I go off of the Fantasy Labs models here, their ratings, and also gut feel. So I'll look at Vegas lines, and I'll read some. I've got a guy who writes for me at the Sports Geek. I'll see what he's into for NBA for the day. If I read his preview article, and let's say he's taking Cleveland -10, then I might want to take some Cleveland players if I like his pick. So that's the kind of stuff I do. I just kind of get my gut feels on the night, decide if I want to fade or go with some of the top plays that everyone seems to be on. And then I build my lineup using Fantasy Labs around that. So yeah, like I said, nothing too scientific. There's not too much to it when I'm just creating 1 or 2 lineups like that. Mostly gut feel and Fantasy Lab player ratings. That's basically it, guys. Hope this video helped you guys. If you enjoyed these videos, make sure you click the like or the thumbs up button. Cheers.